We're working on a 2005 Mitsubishi Endeavor. The rear passenger window won't roll up. So let me show you what I did, and then I'll show you how I should have diagnosed this vehicle. All right, so with the door panel off, we have access to the plug. Now this plug has already been pulled off the window motor. It's just a positive and a negative, or a negative and positive, depending if you're turning the switch up or down. If you want the window to roll up, window to roll down, the motor just switches polarity. But either way, it's a simple motor, power, and ground. So what I did is got my test light, my tail end hooked to a good ground, and this end just front probed into here, and I just turn the switch. So going up, that does nothing, but going down, I get my light. So the other should do the opposite. Going down does nothing, but going up gives me the light. Perfect, got my powers. This thing needs a window motor. If you're thinking the same thing, you'd be wrong. All right, the window motor is getting its powers, good to know. But what about its grounds? For a motor to work, we need power and ground. All I checked was power, power, great, good to go. Let's swap the motor out. In my haste, I was wrong. I swapped the motor out, plugged it all in, and it had the exact same symptoms. That's a pretty rookie move. Now let's diagnose this the real way. So I just have these leads plugged in just for ease of use. They're not absolutely necessary. And then I have a test light. This would have been the best way to do it by just hooking a test light up, because what does a light bulb need? Power and ground. I could have also used this test light that I originally used, but instead of hooking my clamp end into a ground, I could somehow rig up a way to plug into here. Having this just makes it quick and simple. So watch as I go in one direction. Can you see that light? But not in the other direction. So I have power and ground in one direction, but not power and ground in the other direction. Which one am I missing? Well, with my test light, we found that we have both powers. So I'm missing a ground. Let's use something different. Let's say you don't have a test light. How might you still do this same test? I'm gonna hook up a voltmeter. So just plug these in. Turn your voltmeter to volts DC. And right now it's kind of jumping around. That's millivolts. That's not a big deal. So in one direction, we should have 12.18 volts. That's battery voltage. So all the juice from the battery is coming back here. Now in the opposite direction, we should also get 12 volts. And we're not. It's jumping around. That's 1311 millivolts. So here, let's not be confusing. Let me change this range to volts. There we go. That'll be more stable. So we're on volts. So let's do it again. In one direction, we got 12.17. In the other direction, 0.01, really is nothing. Getting nothing in the other direction. So just with a voltmeter, you could do the exact same thing as my test light did. Let me show you one more option. Let me get it hooked up. So your other option is with one of these, a test probe. Power Probe is a brand that makes a pretty good one. This is a knockoff, a cheaper one. You can get them for under 100 bucks, the knockoffs. Power probes are a little more expensive, but what's nice is one end is hooked up to your battery, positive and negative, and this thing will detect green for ground. So this side has a good ground at the moment. And nothing. Now let's turn the switch on. And this still has ground. Turn the switch in the opposite direction and it turns to power. And then here, I have power in one direction, but no ground. So this pin right here is the one that's missing the ground. I have power on both, only ground on one. So this window's problem was it would roll down, but not roll back up. So this is a pretty basic window setup. So now let's find out why are we missing our ground? Let me show you a quick wiring diagram and briefly explain how this system works. Hopefully you guys can see this well enough. So this right here is our window motor relay, and then this big box here is our main switch on the driver's side. So right here is our power. Power comes down, feeds our main switch, but then it also comes down here and feeds all our back switches. So we have the left rear window, right front window, all share a common power. The ground comes from our main switch. There's a ground here on this side, comes down, and then a ground on this side, and then same with all of them. So these motors are double grounded. So when this thing is at rest, nothing's being pushed, they have ground on both of those pins plugged into the motor. So how the system works is this is a ground at all times, and then when you hit the switch, it moves this ground to the positive. So now we have a ground and a positive. So positive, negative. Now this motor can spin. If you want it to go in the opposite direction, then what the switch does, it makes the other side connect to power. So now you have a power on the opposite side, and then the ground stays on this side over here. So that's how it swaps polarity, is these are always grounded, and then which one touches the power determines whether it goes up or goes down. So hopefully that makes sense. So really, let me erase all of this. We're missing our ground. That's the important part. Where does our ground come from? Right here is the right rear window, so that's what we're working on. Our grounds come from our main switch. We're missing a ground. What we have to do is go back, look at the wire color, and see which ground are we missing. Then go to the main switch and see, are we getting that ground from our main switch? If we are, then there's a break somewhere on the wire causing us to lose our ground. If we're not getting ground out of this main switch, now we need to figure out why. Is it this main switch that's the problem, or something else? So let's go to the main switch, check our grounds. Let me erase and we can see what colors we need. So we need, looks like green and yellow and orange. Those are our two grounds that go to our back switch. So let's hook up here. Let's pull this off. We'll hook up our probe and see if we're getting our two grounds. So this is the main switch, just popped out of its little holder. So right here is our green and yellow, and then our orange. They're right on the ends, easy to get to. Let's go ahead and test them. I'm just using the probe, and it'll light up green if we have a good ground coming out of the switch. So I don't know if you can see that. It is green and beeping. So that's our orange. Now the yellow, or the green and yellow, that too is beeping green. So the green and yellow is the one that we're missing over on the other side. That's the ground. But we're getting ground out of the switch. So this switch, the main switch, is not bad. It's sending its ground, it's just not making it to that passenger rear window. So how are we gonna find that break in the wire? So in order to find this break, we have to think, where are wires going to rub? Where are they going to flex and stretch and bend all their life? These are the places that it's gonna eventually wear out and possibly break. So first thing I think of are the wiring in between the door at that hinge. It has that little rubber cover over it. Well, inside there, those wires are always bending as the door opens and closes. Same with the rear passenger. So it could either be this driver front, or that passenger rear, the one that's not working, it could be in that door as well. Now just thinking that this driver door probably gets used more often than that rear door, that's where I'm gonna focus for a start. That's where I'm gonna start my diagnosis, is right there. Now on this particular vehicle, I did find the plug on the inside by the kick panel. That's the plug that all the wiring from the door plugs into the main harness to the car. Pretty easy access, so we're gonna do some checks there. If we're getting our ground on that same green and yellow wire, at that connector, then we know that it's not broken in the door jamb because it's making it from the switch through the door jamb to the connector. So let's do it. So this is the connector inside the vehicle. One side comes from the door, and then the other side is just the vehicle harness. So I have a little back probe. We're gonna go into our orange as a test, because we already know our orange is good. So we're gonna back probe into there, just to make sure that our equipment's working. There we go, green. That's our ground. And then now our green and yellow, we'll probe into that, and nothing. So let's just move it again, just in case we don't have a good connection. Okay. And still, we have nothing. So our break is somewhere between this connector and our switch on the door. So the next thing I'm gonna do, just to try it, to see if our wiring is good from this point to the switch, I'm gonna feed this a ground, because that's what we're missing back there. I'm gonna feed a ground right into here, and let's go back there and see if now we get powers and grounds on both sides. I got our light bulb hooked up, so now we have power and ground in this direction and that direction. So both up and down give us our light. So this tells us that the green and yellow wire from where we gave it a ground all the way back to this door is good. So there's not a break in this door or anywhere in between. So now we're focusing all our energy at that front door. So I just grabbed the wires and started pulling on them one by one, and 3 of them already came out. So this is our green and yellow. So I'm gonna let the customer know the door has to come off, all this has to come out, re-spliced, and then put back in, and then that rear window is back up and running. All right, so that is the diagnosis of this vehicle, a diagnosis I should have come up with the first time. I got moving a little too fast, a little too hasty, pulled the trigger, and I missed. So this is a good lesson for me, of course, not to be overconfident, but to think things through. And then also maybe for you guys, getting comfortable using an electrical wiring diagram, knowing how electricity flows, how motors should work. Really simple, power, ground. Every electrical thing, even complex computer systems, need a power, need a ground. Without those, it won't operate. So just those simple checks can go a long way, just knowing how to check for powers and grounds. All right, well, hopefully you got something out of this. If the customer says go ahead and repair, we'll repair, and I'll have some bonus footage at the end of this. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, see you on the next one. All right, we got the door off. I didn't record it because I didn't know how well it was gonna work. But basically what I did is I got 2 jack stands. So I opened the door and put those jack stands in line of the door, the bottom of the door, put towels over the top of them, and then just unbolted the door check from here, and then the 4 bolts holding the door on, and then the door rested on the jack stands. Then I just took a screwdriver and popped out this grommet here, and then just pulled it out, brought it over, set it down, and I just have a little rag here to just protect it. Customer's door, don't want to scratch it up. So from this point, all I'm going to do is pull off this little grommet boot protector. It's just right here, got some tape on it, pull that off, find those broken wires, get those repaired, slide the boot back on, and then reinstall the door. I don't know if I can slide this all the way out. Let me see how many. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, fished all the wires through, so we got 6 broken wires, matching 6 broken wires over here. And then there's one partial, I don't know if you can see it, but it's definitely cracked. The wire inside looks good, but I'm still just gonna cut that and splice it together. So now, what I don't want is to just solder these together. There has to be a lead in between, otherwise it'll be too short. But that was a little challenging. I had to just fish it in with a little wire and then wrap it around and pull them through. But I think we got it. So now we just make little leads, solder them together, and we're done. All right, so there we go. So I actually pulled it through even more and brought out the speaker just to give me more room. So you'll notice a few things. All the leads are blue. I cut it way back because right here where it flexes in the car, I don't want the connectors to be there because they're really stiff and not flexible. So I cut it back further and then spliced it in. So now where the door flexes is all flexible wire. And then I didn't have solder. These are all butt connectors. In my experience, these are very strong if you crimp them correctly, and they're heat shrunk. And when you heat shrink them, it's almost an additional glue that sticks to the casing of the wire. All right, so that is that. I'm gonna put it back in and then get this back to where it needs to go. And I think we're solid. All right, that's what it looks like inside. Hopefully you can see that. It's nice and taped up. I got the door bolted back on. Got this, got the key in the ignition. So this one is the driver. That's always worked. Still works. Passenger, that one's always worked. This one has always worked. They're all still working. Now that one in the back was our issue. And there we go. Got it.